Hi,
Hello,
everyone.
everybody. Hello, Lynn and Grant. How are you doing?
Exciting. Nice to see you
Hi,
again. Thank you so
Kadi.
much for coming.
Good to see some happy, well, friendly faces again. So,
So
thank you.
exciting, isn't
You're
it?
amongst family here.
Yes.
100%. So I think we have started recording now. Is that right, Precious?
Yeah, I'm recording already.
Fantastic. So we're going to start off with obviously a bit of housekeeping and sort of getting to know each other a bit more. And of course, I know I'm conscious that it's only 1 minute past 3, so people might start to pour in. This part is being recorded, so a lot of people are going to watch it after. And as I said, when we move to the questions and answers, we will stop recording to give you a completely safe space to ask any questions that you'd like to. So, Precious, could we please move on to the next slide? There's quite a lot of stuff here, but of course we do all respect each other at Sage, and we just want to make sure that given the environment today that we continue that through to this session. Today's participants are made up of community members and allies, and of course everybody's welcome here. The introduction and panel discussion will be recorded, as I mentioned, and we will then stop recording for the Q&A session to allow you to ask questions in a completely safe space. Please use the chat box throughout the panel to ask the questions or raise your hand in the Q&A session. And please respect names and pronouns for all participants in this session. Hi, Ben. Use I statements. Always speak from your own experiences and not the assumed experiences of others. Respect privacy and confidentiality. Information shared in this meeting should be kept confidential, particularly when we get to the Q&A sessions. Be mindful of intent versus impact. Sometimes what you mean comes out differently to how it lands. Give grace. We are all at different places on our journey, and being an ally is all about making mistakes along the way, learning from them, and never doing them again. And finally, allyship is a verb. It's about doing the work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And it's lovely to see so many proud and active allies already on the call today. So we're going to move on to the agenda. We've got an introduction to the panel, the special guest Pips Bunce coming up next. Then we're going to talk about gender identity and give you an overview. For those of you that were on Binary and Biscuits on Tuesday, you will have heard about gender identity then, but we wanted to give a recap so everybody on today's call can understand the terminology that might be used throughout the panel discussion. Then we'll move on to the all-important panel and then Q&A sessions at the end. On to the next one. So, I mean, somebody that doesn't really need much introduction because I'm pretty sure that I bang on about you all the time here, Pips. Pips Bunce, over to you for a brief intro, please.
Thank you very much, Vicky, and hopefully technology is working. I guess, first of all, it's an absolute honour and a pleasure to be here. So thank you, Vicky, for making this happen and the entire team at Sage. I've had the pleasure of working with quite a few of you many times before, and it always is honestly such a pleasure. So I mean that. Thank you for that. So my name is Pips Bunce, pronouns she, her, and they. I'm a director at Credit Suisse, also head of our investment banking technology strategic programs. I think more relevant to this, I'm also one of the co-leads of our LGBT and ally network at Credit Suisse. So I'm really proud that we've got over 7,500 active and engaged allies. So, you know, this is a topic very close to my own heart. I do a lot of work outside Credit Suisse as well. So I'm an ambassador for Stonewall, diversity role models, Involve, Mermaids, DRM, Trans in the City. Personal identity wise, so I'm gender fluid and non-binary, so both parts of the trans spectrum. Gender fluid purely being, and I think we've got a lot of experts on this call anyway from the sounds of your previous sessions, but gender fluid is, you know, I don't know how my expression is going to be until I wake on a given day. Some days I may wake up and want to choose and express this way, other days the other end of the spectrum, and other days, you know, somewhere in the difference. So my gender expression to the outside world is fluid. From an identity perspective, I'm non-binary, so I don't identify as purely male or purely female. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm a mixture of both, neither of both. So I definitely don't fit into the little neat box of binary gender focused ways of working. Personal level, I've been married to my lovely wife for over 27 years. We've got 2 children that are 25 and 22. And I'm so proud that, you know, they are all the most amazing allies ever. I've always had thankfully a very open and accepting and loving family around me to, you know, love me unconditionally for who I am and not based on how I choose to express. And for me, this type of stuff is really important. You know, I've lost several friends to suicide over the years, and I know the impact that allyship and these types of events make. So thank you for the opportunity, because honestly, I'm so honoured to do anything like this, you know, whether it's speaking in Parliament, working at the Government Equalities Office, or speaking at external firms. People standing together in this way as a collective, I know makes so much difference. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other panelists too, because I know them fairly well, and I know they're amazing. Thank you. Back to you, Vicky.
Thanks so much, Pips. And I think you just condensed it all down into A, why you're my best friend, and B, why you're such an inspirational role model to me and everybody else. So thank you so much for being here today. Max, it's a bit of a hard intro to beat that one, isn't it? But do you want to give us a little brief overview of you and your role at Sage?
So hello everybody, my name's Max. I've not got anywhere near as impressive of a story as Pips, but I work as a sales apprentice within Sage, and I'm also a Pride Kick and lead within Gender Alliance. So I like getting involved with everything related to both CSNs.
Thank you so much, Max. And how about you, Mel? And the dreaded mute button.
So hello everyone. My name is Mel Coleman, pronounced they them theirs, and I work in the global employer branding team. I was born and raised in Kenya, which is a completely different landscape to being here, and so yeah, I just feel very grateful to be part of Sage, and anybody who knows me knows that. So yeah, so thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mel. And last but by no means least, how about you, Eddie?
Hi, I'm Eddie. Well, my Arabic name is Ezzedine. I'm from the Middle East. I was born in Iraq, lived in Jordan, part Turkish. There's a bit of a mixture there. Came to the UK 7 years ago and joined Sage 2 years ago as a grad. And my pronouns are he, they, she. I am gender fluid, non-binary, and as Piff so gracefully explained it, couldn't have put it better myself. So yeah, that's me. All my free time, I'm taking up sewing, starting off like little bit by bit. So that's some of the stuff I like. I like design. I like that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I express my gender in all kinds of ways in fashion and makeup. Sometimes I look more math. Sometimes I look more femme. Just depends on my mood, I guess. But yeah, that's me.
Fantastic, thank you. And it's lovely to see all the panel getting some love already from the audience. I think everybody's so engaged. We're going to move on now, and Eddie's going to talk to you a little bit about what is gender and gender identity to really help you put into perspective some of the conversation that we have in the panel today. So Eddie, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, so according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, gender is the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits typically associated with one's sex. In other words, gender is a social construct. What gender is, how it's defined, and sort of its position within our societal structure and how we view it, it really changes over time and from different places, different cultures. In our modern society, usually gender is, we're referring to the sort of the norms or the roles that we have, and usually we ascribe it to men or women, girls or boys, and sort of it's all kind of based on masculinity versus femininity kind of way. And it tends to be sort of based on that assumption that's formed about what men, women, girls, and boys should be like, look like, act like, and not how they want to be. And so let's sort of explore that further. First off, let's define a few terms. So first off, sex. That refers to the biological, physiological characteristics of males and females and intersex people. That could include sexual development in terms of organs, hormones, chromosomes. So all the actual physical, tangible aspects of that make a person. On the other hand, gender is not really a physical or a physiological or tangible aspect. It's more of the social aspect of it, of how we view ourselves and how we sort of view that might affect how our sort of expression to society. And that brings me to gender expression. And that's sort of how that person views or senses themselves and their gender and how they want to sort of view it to society and how they would like society to view them. And in terms of sexual orientation, that refers to their emotional, romantic, sexual attraction to people based on their gender, really. So all of those combined sort of create the person's gender identity. And if we want to like sort of look at it in more graphs, I guess, a person's gender identity could be man, could be woman, could be non-binary. So it's all exists on a spectrum, or it could be neither. Myself, I identify as a non-binary person, and as gender fluid, so that sort of fluctuates on that spectrum. And of course, that the expression from that gender identity can be sometimes feminine, sometimes masculine, or androgynous, which means that's sort of like a mixture or in between of the two, not necessarily one or the other. And as you're sensing here, the running theme is spectrum. All of it falls on a spectrum. And that identity doesn't necessarily correspond with certain sex characteristics, such as physical characteristics or chromosomes or hormones, as explained before. There are many intersex people or people who are sexually like male, but still have variations in those characteristics or chromosomes or hormones. But all of that still does not dictate what their sexual orientation is. They can, regardless of their gender identity, they can be homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, heterosexual, or asexual. And again, still falls on a spectrum at the end of the day. So I guess the running thing from that as well, and some key takeaways from it, is gender identity, as much as sort of societal norms, and we sort of try to assume or try to determine what someone's gender is based on how they look or dress or act or what they are. We can't really know that for sure, and the best way to do it is just to ask them or for them to tell you. For example, today I might look more masculine than I do in other times, and can be easy to assume one thing or the other, but it's not necessarily true. Some men are more feminine, some women are more masculine, some people are both or neither. There's no exact rule or every time you see something in particular means one thing or the other. Just ask them, they'll tell you, really. And yeah, gender, again, exists on a spectrum. Each of us lies somewhere on it. Some people could be on one end or the other or in between. And I happen to be one of the people who are in between again. Yeah, today also in the panel, you might hear the term cisgender person. And just to explain what that is, it's just a person who basically whose gender identity corresponds with the sex that were registered for them at birth. So it could be a person who is assigned male at birth and they identify as man or woman or otherwise. So yeah, that basically is a quick run through of gender and sex and all that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And it doesn't matter how much I think I know about the topic, I always learn something new as well. So really appreciate that. So we're now going to go to the all-important panel. And I think Precious is going to spotlight the panelists for us so we can see exactly who's talking. So we'll just give her a minute while we do that. Sorry, Mel, you're the first. Apologies there. And Eddie to follow. Last but not least, here comes Pips. Fantastic. So we can see you all quite clearly now. In fact, I've got double of you, but we'll go with that. So there's lots and lots of people on my screen at the moment. So what we did over the past few weeks was we reached out to community members and allies, and we asked them what were the burning questions that you would love to ask this absolutely awesome panel today. And not to put you on the spot, team, but we've got a lot of them, and I've managed to whittle it down to 12. So there might be some where we cross topic and we maybe even answer them in a couple of different ways. But I would absolutely love to ask you the questions and then have you basically contribute where you want to. Does that sound good? Awesome.
Perfect.
Fantastic. So the first question, and Pips, I feel like as our special guest today, I really want to aim this one at you. So this is the only one that I'm actually going to direct. But yeah, not to put you on the spot at all. But the question is, when did you know that you were trans, and were you able to identify what you were feeling?
That's a good one. When did I know? I think I knew, and to be honest, a lot of trans people that I know and speak with, this is quite common, but I knew from an incredibly young age, probably about 4 or 5. And I think certainly at that age, I certainly didn't know terms like transgender and non-binary and, you know, a lot of the amazing terms that Eddie that just done an amazing job at talking us through. I just knew I was perhaps different to some of my friends. You know, I would be happy with my clothes and my toys and myself, but I would also want more. So, you know, even at that young age, I would also be asking my mum and dad for dresses and clothes and tiaras and, you know, a lot more expression and different things than a lot of my friends would. And, you know, even being that young child, you soon realize, well, actually, you know, is this okay? And, you know, is it okay? And why am I the only one doing this? How come I'm the only? So I think it was very young. I was fortunate in that, you know, I could then at least explore and be questioning and understand that identity. And I think for me, definitely coming out in the personal life was easier. I think for me, I found coming out in the corporate world a lot harder because you've got all sorts of other dynamics of bullying and culture, and will it affect your career, and will you lose friends, and will people judge you, and you know, those things, all those things that go into that pot of things to stop you coming out and being your authentic self in the corporate workspace. So I definitely knew from a very, very young age. I think it took me quite a while in life to find the courage to come out fully to everybody, i.e. including the workspace, because it was only probably 9-10 years ago, right, that I come out in the corporate financial markets, which was a challenge, which was equally incredibly amazing, the response. But yeah, definitely very young age, I knew, didn't quite know all the dynamics and the importance. And I think you better understand yourself once you've got the full freedom to fully explore your identity and your expression. You then really realize which thing that you fall into, which label that might best suit you, or there may be no labels that suit you. But for me, definitely, I love the non-binary, the gender fluid, the gender expansive, the gender non-conforming, because to me, that's, you know, it resonates what I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pips. Does any of the panel want to contribute to that one? Or would you like to move on to the next question? You're getting lots of rounds of applause there. I find this really hard because I can just see so many Pips and Eddies across the screen. There's lots and lots of different people. Fantastic. So we've got some questions coming through, and we're going to answer these at the end. Okay. So the next question, and it might actually relate to what you've just said, Pips, but I will open it up to the whole panel. Why is using pronouns and non-gendered language so important? Who would like to take that?
I'm happy to take that. So I think in general, just even though it might not be clear, you know, for a person, if you just met them for the first time, you might ask them a question like, what is your gender? What are your pronouns? First thing is sort of affirmation for that person's gender identity and how they sort of feel when you use that person's pronouns, when you use that person's you know, the language and gender neutral language in general. They feel validated, they feel included. Myself, if I'm like, say, in a Teams call or a group call with my you know, team and stuff, there might be words like men or gentlemen or something like that, and that could sort of come off like, well, it doesn't always validate. But if like when you use terms like people, everybody, you all, y'all, I use y'all a lot. It just feels like everybody's included in that part, and not just necessarily non-binary people, but men, women, and it's equal and puts everybody on an equal sort of place. So I guess, yeah, that's my partner.
Yeah, it's a really valid point, Eddie, isn't it? Pips, have you got anything to add there from your perspective?
I think it's touching on a similar thing. I think it's all about respecting people's identity. I think, you know, if you are making a point of using inclusive language that's not excluding a certain group of people, so if you were just to say, you know, gentlemen and ladies or whatever, you will know full well that is excluding a certain amount of people that don't fall into those binary buckets. And, you know, schools and universities we work with typically nowadays, we see about 12% of the students being gender non-conforming. So, you know, this is a very prevalent identity. So it's really important to at least try and consider in the language you're using, because I think, like Eddie said, it's respecting someone's identity. And in doing so, you're fostering that sense of belonging, the fact that people can be their authentic self, they will be respected and included. And it's important to do that, because if you don't do that, you can be invalidating someone's identity. You know, there's nothing worse than being introduced and, you know, you're not included in that name or token or whatever that's used. So yeah, I'd much rather err on the side of being inclusive and making people feel they belong rather than invalidated and not included.
Yeah, I think we've been out on a few occasions, haven't we, Pips, where people have done that to others, and it just seeing that person, well, you see their whole world crumble around them, and it's really not a nice thing to go through. Next question. So this starts off with a very positive statement, which is awesome. I'm delighted that society is starting to evolve and be more accepting, but I know there's work to be done. Has anybody ever made you feel that you cannot be your authentic self, either in the workplace or in your personal life? And how did that make you feel? Who would like that one? And I realise there's probably some triggers in there as well. So I hope you're okay to answer that.
Yeah, I think given my sort of background, some people might assume throughout a lot of my life, it's been very difficult to sort of express myself or be accepted as the identity that I'm trying to express. People would immediately try to like shut that down and or say it's a phase or say that it's wrong or say that it's you shouldn't do that because men are supposed to do that and you're a man. And I'm like, no, not really. And just trying to sort of have my voice heard in that way, whether it's in personal life and in many different in school and university, and just having the courage to sort of fight against it and be like sort of, I guess, fierce. I guess all the pushback. Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to do. But I'm sort of over time, and I'm glad that I'm here. I've always been sort of like, or like I like to think myself as sort of like a fighter in that sense, and sort of try my best to push against that. So yeah, still to this day, like, I mean, we're in 2022 and things are a lot better than they were before, but we do face those, like, sort of, whether it's microaggressions or those discrimination or those small things where, for example, I'm going to a shopping or something and I'm trying to went to the women's section and then people will be looking at me like, what are you doing here? Or like, I'm like the lost kid kind of way. Or if I ask like someone, what, like a staff for help and they look at me weird, like, are you okay kind of way. It does happen quite often. And that's aside from things, you know, proper attacks and stuff like that. But yeah, it's all about standing up to it, I guess. And staying strong. Yeah, that's my bit.
Thanks so much for sharing, both of you. Another question. What are some experiences that a trans or gender non-conforming person may have in the workplace that a cisgender person may not? Really good question there. Who would like to say that?
I can. Oh, sorry. I'm going to let Mel go first. You go first, Mel. Please do.
Okay. I would say, you know, a number of them. One, you know, would be the assumption that, you know, if you're dressed a certain way, then you must be something or the other. So, you know, cisgender people don't have to think about what it feels like to be called sir or madam, or, you know, when they don't identify as such, for instance. Another one is bathrooms. So, like, you know, if you're working in a place that doesn't have a gender neutral bathroom and you identify as being non-binary or anything, and you just, you know, you just don't feel comfortable in either the male or the female bathroom, and yeah, that's something that I guess, you know, cisgender people would not necessarily have to think about. I think even sometimes, even just wearing like the lanyards, you know, I tend to subconsciously feel more comfortable when I meet people, even if it's people I've never met, I don't know about, who wear the lanyards. You just feel like that's a person, like there's support there, as opposed to people who don't. I don't know. It's just, maybe again, also it's just coming from a place where you're used to people not being as nice, you know. But it's just, and I just think, you know, cisgender people wouldn't necessarily think of that. But yeah, sorry, Pips, go ahead.
No, you've done excellent ones, and I would say all of those ones definitely. I think also, and this doesn't just apply to trans people, right? But also, you know, coming out, you know, the sheer volume of the times that you have to come out to different people, because it's not a one-off thing. So you are constantly having to explain and qualify and help people on that journey, which is a good thing, but that comes with a certain amount of, you know, emotional tax with them. I think also being the only, you know, quite often if you look around in a meeting room, in a company, whatever, and if you are the only person that happens to be gender non-conforming or trans or queer or whatever, that can be an incredibly lonely and scary place. And I think people don't always always quite comprehend the impact and how that can feel. I think also systematic changes. Most people, when they're using systems, they don't even think twice about the fact that they are represented. When you're having to put your details into a system, and if you don't have non-binary pronouns or the ability to have different names or some of those things, that's forcing you to invalidate your identity yourself because they don't have the right drop down boxes in their systems, and that can have a huge impact on you, which obviously a lot of people wouldn't quite comprehend. Two other ones, I think. One, not having to put a facade on. If you're not comfortable being out, or if you're not out yet, that again has a huge impact on you personally if you're having to lie and watch your language and not be true about your authentic self. And I think finally the flip side, and this is almost a positive, I don't think cisgender people always quite comprehend the massive positive impact they have on those trans people and those queer people around them. It's, to me, it's one of the most transformative things of changing a culture of a firm. And I'm always telling allies they are superheroes, but I don't think they quite know the impact of their words, the impact of wearing that lanyard, the impact of having pronouns in their email signature. The impact of that will go far beyond the people that they can see and they interact with. So, and I don't think they're always aware of that. So a mixed bag there, Vic, a few I would say.
Yeah, Pips, you're not joking, are you? Because every time we go to an event, you put on there, what is it, Vicky Rowland, champion of the world, which doesn't always go down too well, does it?
You are the champion and the ally of the world, Vicky. Own it.
Thank you so much. This one makes me quite sad, actually. So I have a colleague who I've heard is trans, but I'm really scared to say the wrong thing and have therefore defaulted to just avoiding talking to them. Is there any advice you can give me to help me get over that worry? Sad one, isn't it? Who would like to take that?
Yeah, I think I'll say something real quick, but basically, that's in general, I've seen like a lot of people sort of shy away from asking questions like that or engaging in that kind of conversation, or even like sometimes talking to gender non-conforming people and trans people, non-binary people, because they're scared of saying the wrong thing, they're scared of getting canceled or something like that. And I'm like, really, if you're approaching it like respectfully, if you're actually genuinely trying to learn, I will respect you way more if you ask me the question than if you just didn't, and or like something like that. And like, yeah, I guess in short, there's no like, as long as like the intention is good, questions are always welcome.
Yeah, and can I build a bit on that as well, Vicky? Because I think that's spot on. I think also step up as an ally, show that to them, empathize, understand their lived experience, because I can guarantee you they will really appreciate that, and the person will learn so much from that. Because I think, like you said, Eddie, you don't want people walking on eggshells where they're scared to have these conversations, because people do make mistakes, people do say the wrong things. It's fine, they apologize, you move on. You can clearly tell if something's coming from a space of wanting to cause you upset and harm versus a genuine mistake. So I think it's always important to let allies know that have those conversations, engage with gender non-conforming people, and learn from that, because it's really important. And visibly show your support. I think we touched on it earlier. I think you said it, Mel. I get so much love and empathy and compassion from when I see people with lanyards and visible signposting, because you just know instantly that they are a true supporter and friend and ally and advocate. And I think generally people are, but I think having that visible, clear sign goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it aligns nicely with our values of being bold and sort of creating that human touch and really reaching out to people, right? Thank you. On that topic, Pips, if I was to misgender somebody accidentally, either in person or when they're not present, how would I go about correcting myself?
Well, I guess for me, if someone does it to me, I will always just, call it in, just mention, did you know you just misgendered me? My actual pronouns are X, Y, and Z, and just let them know of their mistake, not in a bad way. And I say call it in rather than calling it out, because there's a big difference. Calling them in is about letting them know in a nice way so they understand the impact of their words. They understand that actually, as a trans person, when people misgender you, it is hurtful. It's, to me, it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. It's not calling something out where you're wanting to make a spectacle of them, because you can generally, it's not from a bad place. It's a genuine mistake, and it's better to tell people. Equally, though, I think, it's nice when allies step up as well, even if you're not in the room. When an ally steps up and said, actually, did you realize that you introduced that person using the wrong pronouns, or their actual pronouns are X, Y, and Z? it's really nice, and I think it can have even more power when that message comes from an ally to the person. So I think, you know, everyone doing this fine, but it's fine. You know, people do make mistakes. It's not a case of making a big thing out of it and creating that culture where people are scared to use pronouns, because that's the last thing that we want.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're getting so much positive commentary there that I lost track of it, reading all these awesome comments about obviously understanding the importance of wearing lanyards and the difference between sort of calling it in rather than calling it out. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Next question. Again, this is probably a bit of one that's a hot topic for a lot of people. I've heard that NHS waiting times for those who choose to transition are years long, even the initial diagnosis. Are there any other channels of support out there for trans people? Who would like to take that one?
I'll take this one if that's okay. So I'm aware of a really, really great organisation that I don't think get enough credit, and they go by the name of Gender Care. And what they are is a private organisation of NHS doctors that have come together to work out of hours in their own time to help people get through like their gender transformation, and if they're transitioning, then they've got loads of support after. They've got loads of support there to offer people. So the organisation itself was started 7 years ago, I believe, by a doctor called Dr. Lorimer, and I've experienced the appointments firsthand and can say that the doctors there are also genuine. They're all they want what's right for the person. So it's just a nice system to have in place, and they've got like 70 years of gender experience between them, so you know you're in good hands. I know through the NHS appointments get pushed back constantly. So through Gender Care, it does come with a little bit of a cost, but it gets you there a lot faster, and there's even free support you can get from their website. I'll pop a link to the website in the chat. But sorry. So personally, I've used their free deed pool, for example, on their website, where through the government, like officially you have to pay, I think it's near £50 to change your name, but Gender Care have put together a website where you can create a free deed pool. So it's just, they're doing things and putting motions in place to make transition more accessible for everybody. So they're a really great organisation to shout out.
They sound absolutely amazing, Max. Would you be happy to share the details in case anybody does have people that are going through transitioning and don't know where to turn?
Of course, I'll pop them in the chat now.
And while I've got you, this question is probably going to be one for you, because I know that we were talking about this a few weeks ago, weren't we? Are you happy to talk to the group about what Trans Day of Remembrance is and what it means for you and why it's held?
Yeah, so Trans Day of Remembrance is something that's been going on since 1999, I believe, and it was started by somebody who was an ally in the community called Gwendolyn Ann Smith, and they held a vigil in honour of their friend Rita Hessner, who was a woman who was killed in 1998, the year beforehand, and they were stabbed 20 times inside of their own home. So they held this vigil to kind of commemorate and bring to life the memory of their friend Rita. And it's something that we continue to celebrate every year, because there's still a lot of hate crimes against transgender people, way, way more than there should be. Well, there should be none, obviously, but the statistics on it are genuinely heartbreaking. Just to quote something according to the Home Office, and between the years of March 2021 and March 2022, there was 155,841 hate crimes reported to the police, and 4,355 of them were transgender related, and they are only the reported crimes. And I can't stress that enough, because there is a lot of shame that comes around trying to report something. If you're getting hate against just your identity itself, it's hard to reach out to people. It's hard to especially talk to the police about it at times. So we have that Trans Day of Remembrance just to bring to light kind of that this is still a huge issue amongst like the community. It's something that we're still fighting for, and we need to stop losing lives just because people want to live their lives in the identity that they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's this Sunday, isn't it? And I will be lighting a candle at home. Thank you so much, Max. I know that's an emotive one, so I hope you didn't mind me putting you on the spot there.
That's okay.
On a happier note, and that's what we're celebrating today, isn't it? It's awesome Trans Awareness Week and all the good that we can do. Has anybody ever found allies in unsuspected places? Who would like to answer that?
I can take that one. So I have an aunt who is, my background is very Christian heavy and like traditional Christian. So I have an aunt who it's very interesting. She believes in God, but she doesn't believe in hell. But anyway, so we were having a conversation, and it was when I was like coming out to her as trans. And so I remember I told her, it was like, so I came out to her and I was like, because I was also still struggling with like trying to reconcile my faith and being trans and all of that. And then she looked at me and she was like, we're made in the image of God, right? And I was like, yes, we are. And she was like, and who told you that the image of God is the body? The image of God is your spirit, and everybody's spirit is the same spirit. Like it's nothing to do with your. And then she just moved on. It was so funny how she just did that. And she was like, yeah, and she just moved on. And I was like, well, that's really cool. And many times you speak to people. I'm so sorry. Someone's saying something. So many times you speak to people and they say things like, oh, the older generation, it's just how they were raised. My aunt is 70. Like I stopped listening to that thing of like the older generation from that. I was like, there's nothing like that. Like if if you've done the work, if you want to show up for people, you will show up for them. If you want to learn and unlearn and just be a good person, I'm sorry to put it like that, you will be a good. It's not about age. So yeah, I thought that was very. And then also on the same one, I'm sorry, my nephew, who has been raised by my sister, who I love very much, but she is very transphobic and very homophobic and all of those things. He randomly, I don't even know where this came from, randomly, he was on the day that he was going to school in a different country. So in the morning we're having breakfast and he's like, oh, if you ever want to do your nails or like if you ever want to do your hair, let me know and I can help you. And I was like, where has that come from? And it was just so interesting how he did that. And we sort of had a conversation around it. And he was like, oh, but yeah, I've grown up with you. And, it's he just said this thing of like, it's not a big deal. Like it's just it's just you. It's like, oh, that's really cool. So yeah, that's my piece. Sorry, I feel like I shouted, but that's my piece.
I love that, Mel. And can I guess, slightly build on that as well? Because I think I couldn't agree more. You can never assume, and you should never assume, because allyship does come in every single way, shape, or form. I think a couple of examples I always give is certainly when I first came out at work, I did not expect the sheer amount of love and compassion and support and humility. I was absolutely blown away by it. Had taken me so long to get to that point to feel safe and confident to come out, but I certainly didn't expect the outpouring of love from so many people reaching out to share, what it just means to them to see someone having the courage to step up and be themselves. So I think that definitely surprised me. And I think also, I think most of us have had experiences of trauma or, whether it's abuse or physical or verbal, and that does give you triggers, and it's very easy to always fear the worst. And I think it's really important to not anchor onto that, but, to comprehend that generally most people are amazing, they're loving, they're compassionate, and they might be curious, but they're not nasty or bigoted. And I think an example I always give is I was waiting to come into work one day, waiting at the bus stop, and there was this sort of big scary looking person walking along the road on the other side. And I just instantly thought, because I saw them stop and start to stare, and I just instantly thought, here we go, they're going to come over, we're going to have a fight, it's going to start hurling abuse at me, and it will go south quite quickly. And he comes over, and I was so wrong. He comes over, very gently spoken, says, "Oh, so sorry to bother you, love. I just wanted to say you look absolutely gorgeous." And it was just such a lovely, nice, sincere thing to say. And I'd instantly worried and thought the worst. So I always try to anchor onto that example of actually, yes, we have triggers. Yes, we have to be careful. But generally, people are amazing, and not to fear the worst.
I've had that happen to me once before as well. I know, I'm just like, so I was walking in the snow pub and someone would walk out and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna attack any second now. And then they'd be like, wow, you look amazing. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you.
And it's so nice, isn't it? It reaffirms your faith in, humankind. Definitely.
Really sound advice there. And yeah, Mads is right when she says you all look stunning today. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Slightly different topic now as we start to talk about family and kids and I quite like this question. My teenage kids' group of friends seem to be less worried about the gender of the person they fancy at school. One minute they'll have a boyfriend and the next a girlfriend. How can I keep up with it all? Who would like to take that?
Is it okay if I jump on this question? So I think in terms of somebody who is, as I'm someone who is 19 and just coming out of the kind of phase with the teenage phase within my life, the biggest piece of advice I can give is the more you push back on teenagers, the more that they're going to push in the other direction. So if you're trying to discourage anything, it's probably not going to be the most effective way to do anything. But the best thing that you can do if your teenage kids not worried about the gender of their person is just to support them in it, because if they're not hurting anybody, what's the harm done? There's nothing wrong with seeing somebody for the person that they are and looking beyond the gender of that person. And if your kid's got something inside of them that allows them to do that, I think that's a beautiful thing that you should let flourish and not try kind of demolish in any way, shape or form. I mean, encouraging people to be more open is what's going to make acceptance easier in the future. So if you can pass that down to your kids, you're already doing like the world a favor.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Matt. Pips, what about from your perspective? Obviously, being a parent as well.
Yeah, no, I'm obviously 1 year older than Max. I'm 20. No, I so wish I'm the other end of the spectrum. I think there's so much that parents can do. I think, you know, coming along to events like this, engaging in the network, learning from the newsletters, the communications, you know, understanding the different identities, because that goes such a long way. And I think, you know, having the children know that their parents want to understand, they want to support, they want to be there by them sides. You know, I think that's the most important thing. Making sure you're fostering an environment at home where people can feel safe to come out, to question, to understand where they are and be supported in doing that, because it's much better to do that with your children than to let them do it on their own, because it's a horrible, scary place and there's a lot of, you know, hatred and discrimination out there. So you really need to be the best parent and support them in finding their true selves. And I think we always encourage our allies at work to engage with your schools, try and get people like Stonewall and diversity models and firms like that involved at the school, because they can then create and foster that environment in the school place. They can have ally programs in the school, and you know, I've seen schools where that is in place and the children are amazing and they can come out freely and they're supported. And I've seen environments where head teachers are telling their kids, you know, this is a phase, you can't be a girl, you can't be this, you know, you're going to grow out of it. And there's a stark contrast between those two. So engage with your schools and get the right organizations involved to give that support. And, you know, there's a lot of them out there: Stonewall, Mermaids, Diversity Role Models, Global Butterflies, the one you mentioned, you know, so many, and it's important. But I think the fundamental thing is shower the children in love and humility and compassion and empathy and help them on that journey. Because, you know, I'm fortunate I've had the flip side of that. I've had an amazing set of children and my wife, etc., that has done the opposite. They've supported me, they've stood by my side, and I appreciate it's a journey for everybody. So, but I know equally how important it is.
I think I'd like to just ask this one as well, because I'm aware that we do have people whose children might be thinking about transitioning or coming out as non-binary. What advice would you give to parents whose children have come out or are trying to come out as trans and non-binary? And maybe, Pips, if we could start with you again from a parental perspective and then put it to one of the others that might have actually been through this and come out to parents.
I think a lot of it is the similar stuff. It's, you know, showing them your love, your support, your solidarity, and standing with them, being on that journey with them. You know, there's a lot of groups that give support to the children as well as the parents, because everyone needs to understand the challenges, the nuances, and what's involved. So I think the more you can do together as a family unit when one of your children or whatever has come out as trans or non-conforming or gender expansive or whatever, that's important. Make sure you're spending a lot of time communicating with them, you know, because things can change quite quickly, and the things they're having to deal with, you need to make sure that you are really by their side. You know, are they okay? Are people giving them grief? You know, what's happening on social media? What's happening at school? Are your friends supportive? It's a constant, regular thing. So be close as part of that journey as well, but equally give them the space and the support to find themselves as well. But I think, you know, the main thing is giving them that love, stand with them, and honestly, that will make such a difference. And don't judge, you know, never ever be judgmental. I think it's everyone's different, and the more you can resonate that to them, that you love them for who they are and what they are, irrespective. It does not matter.
Well said. Anybody else want to contribute on that one?
I mean, I feel like I might say something that might sound just a bit mean, and I don't mean for it to sound mean. It's just, I think just recognize that as a parent, and again, forgive me because this might sound mean, but like it's not about you. Like it's not about, because I say this from like, I guess maybe my own perspective. But like so I will tell a story. It's not the nicest story, but I'll try and whatever. So when I came out to my mom, and she did not react very well, but the story became more of how it made her feel, how it, and I, completely understand that, it is difficult for a parent, it is difficult, but it's really not about you, it's about the child. It's about, you can imagine this person has, lived like Pips was saying, and even in my experience, it is common that people start to recognize they're different very, very early on. And when you're living in a society where that's not acceptable from that time, you do know that. You do live with a lot of shame and a lot of like, there's just so much you've been battling with. It's really not about, you get what I mean? It's really about that child. And so I think just reaffirming to them that you really do love them, that's the first thing. And, and I think it's okay to not have all the right answers and to be afraid and all of that. But the love factor should never feel like it's been misplaced in that fear or in that I don't know what to do with this or whatever. Like the child should still feel like my parent, might be confused, but they still do love me. Like I've not suddenly become somebody else. So I think that's what I would emphasize, that like just, try and step away from it. Like it's and like think about your child and what they could be going through and everything. And then on that as well, and just sort of veers away from the question a bit, but it's still on parenting, is because I read somewhere, and excuse me if this is very wrong, but I think it is right that, like parents in their children's lives have the most permanent and most widespread influence, because this is the person that you've been bringing up and everything. Even for that child, bring them up in a world that, bring them up to be the kind of person that would show up in the world for anybody, so that it's not, you get what I mean, and show up for themselves as well. Like, I think if you start to really train yourself as a parent, I'm not a parent yet, but like to start to accept people, and actually, and I think that's the other thing. I'm so sorry if, I've overspoke, but I was talking to somebody who is a massive ally. And then I asked them the question of, oh, by the way, if your child came out to you, what would you, and it took them a minute to be like, actually, I need to think about like how I'd feel about that. So I think those are some of the things that, people don't necessarily always think about, but start, think about it and sort of think about how, you would react to that. And so that you can also start to show up in the world, whether your child comes out or not. That's already something you've modeled even for them. You get what I mean? I hope I have made sense, especially the second part of it. But yes, that is what I would say.
I feel like you're saying lead by example, right? And treat others the way you want to be treated, which is all a part of allyship to everybody, isn't it? And not just your children. Thank you so much. I think closing question for you, Pips. Let me just, sorry, my screen's just gone blank. Hold on, as has my mind. I think we've got the first steps anybody can take to being an ally is showing up, right? And being here today, everybody is already a fantastic ally. Last question is, how can I be the very best ally to the trans community, both at work and in my personal life? And where can I go to do some further research? What are your thoughts, Pips?
Oh, I think the tagline would literally be the change you want to see. I think, everyone wants to drive us in the right direction and be that change. So people have a responsibility to drive that change. I think, like I said, mentioned before, getting involved in a network, understanding the literature, the communications and the different identities, that goes a long, long way, I think. And definitely do not read everything, whether it's social media or the press, as gospel, because honestly, there is, especially around trans, there is so much bigotry, hatred, and misinformation. So make sure the things that you are reading are balanced, are valid, are correct, and speak to trans individuals themselves, you know, because quite often they are spoke about incorrectly by other people. So get involved with them and learn from their lived experience. I think visible signposting is so powerful, you know, whether it's stickers, lanyards, pronouns, mugs, whatever. If you're someone that's looking to come out and looking for that security, if you're someone that's out needing that affirmation, that sort of stuff goes a long way. And the more that can come from the top of the house is really important. And use your privilege, use your platform, you know, whether you're a team member, whether you're a team leader, whether you're CEO, whatever, you've all got different platforms to send this message out. So I think it's really important that we all have an obligation to make use of our platforms to help spread that word, because that's what really moves people from being an ally, which is amazing, to being an advocate, to really helping other people become allies. I think that's definitely one of the more transformative. And be curious, you know, learn from the individual people, understand what their nuances, their lived experience, the challenges they've faced, and, you know, the adversity they've had to deal with in their life, because you will grow so much more empathy for the community and understanding. And just be proud of the difference that you will make. Because honestly, like I said before, allies are definitely the key ingredient in societal change.
Thank you so much. We've done that in record time. That was perfect, wasn't it? We're going to stop recording now, and we're just going to open up to a couple of questions. Now, Ben, I saw that you had your